Hi guys, Nomis here. Welcome back to Nomishavn for episode number 47. So today I'm embarking on a pretty massive project, and that is the international airport of Nomishavn. So this episode is part 1 of what will be 3 episodes covering this build. That means I will get a full cinematics of the whole build when we get to part 3. The airport is built in the Rosengård district along the southeastern coast, a spot I had been saving up for an airport build because I knew this had the space for what I wanted. Starting in this episode, I'm just setting up some infrastructure to support the airport, sorting out the highway and railway which is heading towards it to get good connections. For the railway, I have a line which is elevated through Rosengård, which I will smoothly get down to ground level and then dip below the highway, where it continues sunken down past the airport. Right in front of the terminal building will be a sunken airport train station, and this will be built and detailed in this episode. To make it easier on myself in getting the airport functional, I will use the airport DLC mechanics and the assets that comes with it, but I will do a lot of work to customize the look of it, which you'll see in these episodes. The focus will first be to get a functional layout of the airport, and then detail it in parts. First of all, I will detail everything that is outside and around the airport terminal and its surroundings, and in part 3 I will do all the detailing of the tarmac, taxiways and runway. So before I talk more about the build itself, I want to go into some brief history of this airport. Nomishavn Rosengård International Airport opened in 1990, and has since its opening seen various upgrades and modernizing. This was the first commercial airport of Nomishavn, with its geographical location close to major Scandinavian cities like Oslo and Gothenburg. Many travelers would come in by trains from the airports in those cities, with Nomishavn being a large rail hub in Scandinavia. However, with an explosion of tourism from Americans and Asians starting in the 1970s, the city saw a need for its own airport, with the local railway lines seeing problems with capacity. With the city being pretty built up already, it had no space for a huge airport. Rosengård, a former rural farmland which had seen an explosion in population after large-scale housing projects constructed in post-war years, had a large amount of available land along its southeastern end along the coast, which was chosen as the spot for the airport. The airport has 12 gates with runway 3,400 meters long, which can handle most long-haul flights. It is connected to the city with a metro line, suburban rail line and several bus routes. Now for the taxiways, I wanted a simple and efficient design. Since the taxiways are one way, I built 2 parallel taxiways, which follows most of the length of the runway, and make sure to create a good amount of connection points to make sure planes can change directions. I then place some blank plane stands, which I will detail in another episode. Here I try to make a layout with the directions that makes sense and is somewhat efficient. I'll continue tweaking on this as we go along. And all of this should leave the airport functional, ready to be detailed bit by bit. After placing the plane stands and getting the airport functional, I work on building out the road network more to get the airport connected. I upgrade the highway to elevated where it crosses over the railway, and I do a lot of detailing with retaining walls and grass surfaces to make everything come together. For the highways, I create a few larger roundabouts as the interchanges where it connects to the street along the front of the airport terminal, and also providing some connections to the nearby neighborhoods across from the airport. If you spot some neighborhoods near the airport which you don't recognize, that's because I've done some builds entirely while live streaming on Twitch, where I go under the same name as on YouTube. I haven't streamed in a little while, but plan to come back to this area pretty soon on Twitch. Before moving on, I also do some detailing with intersection marking tool for the highway and the roundabout. concourse network has this vanilla road wrapping around, which I don't like the look of, so I just use IMT to cover it up with some ploppable pavement surfaces. And now I come to the design of the airport terminal building. I already plopped this modern terminal building from the airport's DLC, but I don't love the look of it and also think it's far too small. What I do here is cover it completely, using a selection of some modern and generic office buildings I have in my collections. The vision behind this airport is a strong focus on function over design. This airport was on some prestige project for the cities to show up. It was built out of necessity. Along the concourse on the tarmac area, I built this plain pavement road with some simple markings. This will be used by different ground vehicles at the airport, and it passes underneath the terminal building, which almost forms like a tunnel above it as it stretches onto the tarmac. In front of the airport terminal building, I got this sunken railway, and now I'll get on to building the sunken airport train station that I mentioned earlier. The railway was extended out here when the airport was built, and I'm going for a very modern and functional design here. A lot of the detailing will be done using intersection marking tool, and a little bit of procedural objects where it's needed. I have these large concrete retaining walls, creating a border for the sunken railway and support, and crossing above it will be a pedestrian bridge. The pedestrian bridge will connect to 2 escalators and an elevator going down to the island platforms, which has access to both tracks of the station. Because of the modern and functional design, I will be using a lot of concrete and glass in the detailing of this station. As a final touch in detailing the station, I added a bunch of wayfinding signs where they make sense to make it easier for passengers to navigate. On the other side of the sunken railway there will be parking lots for the different car rental companies operating out of the airport, and I'll make sure to include this in the wayfinding signs. After leaving this station, the railway goes into a tunnel again, because I want to build something in this spot later on. After a short tunnel it starts going up towards ground level, into an area which will later on become a train depot and rail yard. Because the city of Nomishavn has a strong focus on biking, I figured a fun project would be to give this airport great bike access, something you don't really see a lot. I think it's not too unrealistic considering the airport is within city limits, and many people who take weekend trips with a small backpack could see use for this. A dedicated bike path will pass the airport between the sunken railway and the street along the terminal. Going out of the airport they will dive below the highway and follow close to the highway after getting back to ground level on the other side. Further into the district of Rosengård it will connect to some existing bike path networks I have started to build out on live streams. Close to the terminal I placed 2 of these Japanese bike parking garages for people to park their bikes while traveling. To make them work for my context I covered the Japanese signs with some custom PO signs. Along the concourse I had quite a bit of empty space, so I decided to use this area for a dedicated taxi pickup spot. Along a plain pavement road I placed some blank taxi stands and detail with some shelters and taxi stands. It doesn't end up getting a lot of use, but I think it's a realistic addition. This area where the bike path dips below the highway needs some cleanup with detailing, and I used this really nice quay wall and some retaining walls. The quay walls also looked like a perfect opportunity for pedestrians to cross to the other side of the highway, so I created a pedestrian bridge with stairs using some loose paths and connected it up to the quay wall on both sides of the highway. I don't think this will see a lot of use right now, but it will become useful once we get some development here. Here I'm just decorating that pedestrian bridge I talked about, adding some stair steps with IMT, and also used adaptive networks to add the roofs to this bridge, making it covered. I mentioned a metro line connecting to the airport, and I already had an underground line passing beneath the area of the airport, which made a perfect opportunity to connect here. First off, I deleted tracks so I could make a new alignment according to how the airport metro station is placed. In the workshop I found a metro station which connects directly to the airport DLC concourses, and this was just what I needed. Using the Run Network Replacer mod, I could replace the station tracks with the rendered underground tracks from the BO Metro tracks, and then it was on to detailing. As I usually do, I remove the included props and do my own detailing. For this metro station, I want to make sure it looks like something that was built as part of the airport, a very clean and modern look. The detailing is mostly IMT, and some detailing with PO for the station signs and the adverts and metro maps. Across the sunken railway and next to the highway are the parking lots for the car rental companies. As someone who doesn't drive, I'm not an expert in these, but I built something that is somewhat similar to what I've seen when going on vacation with family where we rent a car at the airport. These Japanese parking lots just felt like the right look for this and had some nice variety. There's going to be 4 separate areas which are fenced in with a gate. On the gates I hang up signs for 4 different car rental companies that I found in the workshop. At the end of this road I built a very small roundabout just to give cars a way to turn around. As I build out around the airport terminal, I get left with a lot of empty concrete space, and I was struggling to figure out how to detail this. Then these planter assets came to my rescue, and I will use these as fillers all the way throughout. Well, there is a lot of transit around this airport. I can't build an airport without parking garages. These standard parking garages have that perfect generic look, where I can just place a bunch of them around. There will be mostly long-term parking, but on this spot, which is somewhat close to the terminal, there will be 2 parking garages for short-term parking. On the entrances I use some blank PO signs to name the different parking garages and whether they are short-term or long-term. I also use these great short-term and long-term parking props from the workshop. Back to the terminal building, I go to add some signage. First I add the logos of the car rental companies on one of the buildings to show that this is their offices. On the main terminal building in the middle, I make some signs with the name of the airport and the signs for the arrival and departure entrances. I'm also adding some bus shelters to have them ready for the bus routes which will go out there. This will be an ongoing process.
I shouldn't want you, I shouldn't need you, but I'm afraid that's not up to me. Cause when I hear you sing through my speakers, it's like my mind takes a hold of me. I've tried shutting you off for some time now, but I'm still hearing your voice in my head. Oh, I wish I was more than your fan now, and that your voice came from here in my bed. You're in my headphones, baby, in my headphones, baby, in my headphones, singing to me.
This detail is inspired by something I saw at the Copenhagen airport. They had these huge letters on a roof spelling out the name of the city. So I will do the same here, spelling out the name of Nomishavn with some big letters on the roof of the terminal building. This Hollywood letter pack from the workshop really worked out perfectly for this.
You're in my and it's so sad, it just makes me cry. Feels like I know you better than others, but you don't care, you never reply. I've tried shutting you off for some time now, but I'm still hearing your voice in my head. Oh, I wish I was more than your fan now, and that your voice came from here in my bed. You're in my headphones, baby, in my headphones, baby, in my headphones, singing to me. You're in my headphones, baby, in my headphones, baby, in my headphones.
After extending and connecting to the service vehicle road on the tarmac on this end, I do a fun little mini detailing project, which will also have some function. Closed off by some metal walls, this will be a loading dock and garbage pickup for the different shops and restaurants within the airport terminal. To simulate some commercial activity inside the airport, I've placed some block service cubes for commercial zones inside the terminal building, and I dragged the building spawn points for garbage and cargo over to this area for all of them. Before finishing off this first part of the airport, I want to just fence in the whole airport area to close it off and have a frame as I move forward. By the two entrances to the service vehicle road, I use this same industrial gate which just fits perfectly everywhere. Something I often see around airports are some small modern office parks, and that is what I'll be building here. It's just going to be a parking garage and a few modern office buildings. For the ground around, I want to freshen it up with some nicer looking tiles, and have a bunch of planter and bench props and so on. The last thing I'll build in this video is going to be a gas station in this empty lot here. I imagine this is where everyone will go to fill up the tank on their rental cars before delivering them back. It's also a handy place for a gas station for locals, being right by a highway exit. So that is it for this video. I won't do any cinematics for this one, that will all come in the third and final part of the airport build. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. A like, comment and subscribe would be greatly appreciated and help me grow the channel. I do also have Patreon, would you wish to support me further. Have a great rest of your day and hope to see you in the next one.